Hello everyone, welcome back to Emily's Bookshelf. Today when my video is going up, it is Remembrance Day in Canada. I think it is also Veterans Day in the States. But in honor of that, I wanted to put a video up about my favorite books that have veterans or soldiers in them. So most of these books, if not all of these books, actually are veterans. So I really wanted to highlight those kind of characters. A lot of those books also, not all, but most of them do talk about the mental health aspect after the wars that these people have fought in. So that is something I really wanted to talk about, books I've enjoyed that do talk about those elements. So we're gonna just jump into it. I don't really have them in particular order, but let's go. The first book is actually a part of a series, so this is kind of a placeholder for a full series, and that is the Ian Rutledge series by Charles Todd. This book is taking place between the world wars, and I think it's really great to talk about shell shock, which is now PTSD, but Ian Rutledge has shell shock, and he is hearing the voice of Hamish, who is kind of like his conscience in a way, but also his intuition, and it's kind of a big problem, and there's a big stigma attached to it for anyone who has shell shock. So it's really prominent throughout the whole series, and this is book 1 in the series. So A Test of Wills is book 1, but it is quite a long series now. I enjoy all of the books, and I think it is really interesting to look at that and to have a character who's so prominently talking about mental health, recovering from the war. A definite favorite book of mine that has a veteran or two would be And Then There Were None. This one talks a lot about the psychological aspects. This is a psychological mystery thriller one, as this is about 10 people who go to an island, and one by one they start dying and they need to save themselves before they're all gone. The mystery is that someone on the island is the killer, and a couple of the guests on the island are veterans. It is something interesting because all of them have been accused of murder in some way or capacity that the law cannot touch them in. And so because of that, the veterans have done something in war. And I think that this book does talk about the psychological elements of this a lot. And I did really enjoy this one. I love this book, and I go back to it again and again and again, as I've talked about many times on my channel. This one is not something that talks about the mental health, but I love this book, and as I was looking at my shelves, I'm like, of course this one has a veteran in it, and that would be Persuasion, as Captain Frederick Wentworth is returning from the Navy. This one is about Anne Elliot, who had been engaged to Frederick Wentworth before he left for the Navy, and then she has persuaded to break off the engagement. Then years later, he comes back and he is highly decorated. He's a much more established man, and she is still feeling feelings for him. I love this book. It's my favorite Jane Austen novel, and I love it. If anyone is interested in getting into Jane Austen, this is my place I would maybe not recommend you start with, because Pride and Prejudice is a really great place to start, but this is my favorite. Kate Quinn is quite good at doing these war novels. So one of them is The Huntress. This one is about 3 people who are all trying to find these Nazis after the war, and you get flashbacks to during the war when one of these women was a pilot during the Russian army, or in the Russian army during that time period. And it is such a fascinating perspective. You get a lot of those parts where they were addicted to these drugs because it made them more alert and faster on their feet. It also made them able to fly at crazy amounts compared to the men, and incredible story. Yeah, so good. And such a great nonfiction, such a great nonfiction mystery thriller element. And yeah, love this one. I also have another one here, so I'll grab it while I'm thinking of it, which is the Alice Network, and her other one, which I think is brilliant. She also has The Rose Code, which I'm in the middle of, and it also covers this kind of topic. But the Alice Network is a book that follows World War I spies, and such a great one about that too. This woman, Evelyn, who is trying to, I think it's Evelyn, I can't remember now, it's been so long since I've read it, but Evelyn, who is trying to basically find out what actually happened, because she has some things where she needs some clarity, essentially. And this is flashing back between World War I and just after World War II. So it's really enriching about history and really wonderful. And I love this one. And these two are both about women who were very active in the war. So very interesting to have women veterans in this time period of history. One that is maybe a little different on the spin would be The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This one is about a young girl when she first goes at the very beginning to Alaska with her mother and father. And her father is dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder from Vietnam War. And they go up to Alaska where essentially she is all alone with her father, who is not mentally well. And this book is about her struggling to survive with that, her mother struggling to survive with that, but mostly her ability. I'm trying to remember her name as I'm talking. One moment. Lenny. Yeah, so Lenny is trying to survive with her father and her mother, but her father is really erratic because he's never dealt with the traumas that he suffers in war. And because it was the Vietnam War as well, he did not receive any gratitude or any proper acclamation. I'm so sorry for the fireplace rearing up right there. But there was a lot of hatred towards him, so he is struggling with that. And this book talks a lot about these elements, and especially while they're up in Alaska and fighting the elements of Alaska at the same time. A nonfiction I have here is Forgiveness by Mark Sacramento. This one, I found this beat up old library copy, but I really wanted to own it. Is about two families who are tied together through marriage, but both families are struggling through what the elements and things they faced in World War II. So one family who was Japanese were in Canada and ended up having to work on a farm because of the internment elements. And that's something that Canadians do not know much about. Maybe they know now, but I did not know much about before I read this book. And the other family had the father who was fighting in World War II having to go to a Japanese prisoner of war camp. And so the element of this book is forgiveness when the two families meet as their children get married. And Mark Sacramento is the grandchildren of those two families' elements. Beautiful book, and obviously has a lot of war elements. It talks about how those two family units met after their traumatic experiences in the war. Another nonfiction I have here is Unbroken. This one was the first book that popped to my mind when I thought about talking about these books or books like this. This one is by Laura Hildenbrand. This one is so hard to read, but so incredible. And this one follows the story of Louis Zamborini as he is an Olympian, and he becomes a part of the army. I think he was a pilot, and his plane gets shot down essentially. I don't remember exactly how, but he ends up on a raft and ends up in a POW camp in Japan. And the trauma, the awful events that happened to him, and it is just so graphic at times. It is horrific. It is traumatizing. And yet the story of strength and determination and survival and the ability to just keep going every day is just so prominent in this book. Oh my goodness. I highly recommend this book, but it is not for the faint of heart, and it is not something to be taken lightly. Like, if you are worried about trigger warnings, I would be very careful picking this book up. But I do know it's a movie, so if you're wanting to not worry too much about reading the whole thing, there is a movie about it. There's actually 2 movies about it, so I'd highly recommend checking out those movies. I haven't watched them myself, but I've heard they're quite good. So, powerful book, incredibly powerful book about a man who just had to keep going one day at a time, and sometimes even 1 minute at a time. So, yeah. The last book I have here is another book series, another character, essentially, which is the Sherlock Holmes series. So John Watson is, of course, at the very beginning we find out that he's coming back from a war and he is in need of a roommate, and he meets Sherlock Holmes. I think that the Sherlock Holmes series has some problematic things coming through the series, but I do truly enjoy the books. I've only read the novels, but I have read some short stories, very few of them, but I have read some. And I do want to read more of the short stories. I want to finish them off. However, I do think the novels are a great way to read some Victorian literature, some old classic mysteries, and it is really interesting to see that through John Watson's eyes. So I think that it's a great character, and it is another interesting fact that he is a veteran. So nice way to end it off on a classic. So please let me know down below in the comments who are some of your favorite veterans in literature, and also please like and subscribe if you are new here, and like if you enjoyed this video. You can always hit that notification bell for every new video that I put out so you'll be notified right away, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.